Hello. So I want to talk about a subject which, a news report, I should say, that has impacted me to some extent personally. So there's a title fight last night, a middleweight title fight between Chris Eubank Jr. and Nick Blackwell. Well, I didn't watch the fight because I didn't have pay-per-view, but Eubank Jr. won the fight, but um, apparently Nick Blackwell was examined by a doctor and he had severely swollen eye. So he was taken to a hospital on a stretcher as a precaution. And now there's reports circulating around that he's in an induced coma. Um, the good news, if we can call it good news, is that doctors don't have to operate. They've done a scan of his brain and there's been no signs of increased pressure on his brain. So that, well, it is good news, but I mean, in the context of the situation, it's very hard to talk about good news. Um, it's good news in context of what's happened. Um, so that's something, but this has affected me quite a lot as a boxing fan and as someone who has aspirations within the sport. Now, what I'm going to say in the following few minutes, I want to make a few things clear. Firstly, the purpose of this video is not to trash or disparage sport. That is not my purpose. And if anyone interprets it that way, well, that's your problem. Secondly, anyone who wants to insult me or anything like that, go and fuck yourselves because I really don't care. Um, and thirdly, what I'm saying is my own opinion. I'm not telling anyone else how to think. But I will speak my opinion, and I'm speaking with conviction here. Um, so with that said, I've just read an interesting report actually, which is a development I hadn't heard about when I initially heard this. Apparently, Chris Eubank Sr. actually stepped in towards the end and told his son to deliberately aim for the body, not the head. Eubank Sr. knew something was wrong, and he said, you could hear it in the audio, said to his son, I tell you what, I don't know why they're not stopping this. He's hurt, so son, aim for his body. It's almost like Eubank Sr. knew something was wrong. And as far as I know, this is before Blackwell was taken out on the stretcher. It could be a psychological thing because, of course, Eubank Sr., who's one of Britain's greatest boxers, was involved in that tragic fight with Michael Watson in 1990. Now, on that occasion, there had been no medical personnel on hand. It took several minutes for them to arrive, and the result was that Michael Watson ended up on a wheelchair. Um, Clearly, the sport has improved since then. There has been improvements. Even amateur bouts have medical personnel on hand. Um, in my own bout, for example, we had to take blood pressure tests beforehand, and they were there ringside the whole time. Um, there has been some who have been critical of the sort of boxing that I was involved in. The British Boxing Board of Control doesn't sanction it, for example, so that's something I'm going to be honest about. And I guess the understanding is that people who've had very limited fighting experience being thrown into the lion's den in that sort of situation. But with the fight I was involved in, we had head protection. Now, with head protection, there's mixed views on that. Ostensibly, it looks like it's designed to protect the fighter. I have to say, personally, I find it difficult because one of the dangers with that sort of head protection, the sort of foam covering all over your head, makes it hard to hear the referee. Um, so if one guy is doing something he shouldn't be doing, he actually can't hear what the referee is saying. It also gives a false sense of protection, which means that inexperienced fighters are more reckless. So if you have this thing on your head, you think, oh yeah, it's just like, it's like Gladiators or something, the TV show Gladiators. But actually, it gives a false sense of safety. I have to say, the event that I was involved in went pretty smoothly. One guy needed to be checked out at the hospital for, luckily he turned out to be fine because he had serious bleeding, external bleeding, and he had shortage of breath, but he turned out to be fine afterwards. And from what I can tell, he's taken up a serious career now. Um, so best wishes to him. There's been a lot of responses to this from professional fighters, other British fighters, Tyson Fury, Scott Quigg, Tony Bellew, and indeed his opponent, Chris Eubank Jr., has wished him all the best, said he fought like a warrior. All that sort of stuff you would expect, because although there's a lot of mudslinging in this sport, every fighter knows that they could be in that position now. I think of the Michael Watson fight, but I also think back to Froch Groves 1. The referee in that situation got a lot of slack for, as a fan, saw it ending it early. I made a passionate defence of the referee at the time, and referees have a very difficult job, because if they stop it early, they're going to get criticised for that. If they stop it late, then they're going to be criticised for potentially putting the fighter's life on the line. I think it's better to stop it early and be criticised for ruining a good fight, rather than stop it too late and a young man is in a life-induced coma. Referees have a thankless job, and I think that's why people need to respect the job that they have. Now, I haven't seen this bout. I can't say with I don't like to criticise referees, but it may be the case that it should have been stopped earlier if Eubank Senior's analysis was correct. Um, I think fans need to respect that. Um, you know, as a fan, I have a real moral difficulty with this, because on one hand, I feel almost like a hypocrite for criticising aspects of the sport, but I can't lie and say that I'm completely comfortable with this. And it isn't just this one situation. There is a lot of aspects of the sport that make me very uneasy. I mean, the truth is, I don't like fights. This might sound strange coming from a boxing fan, which end in a knockout. I prefer a good, tough fight where both guys are standing and the winner is rewarded on points. I actually prefer that to a knockout fight. Other fans, when they see a big knockout, their first reaction is, whoa, that's amazing. My first reaction is, I hope that guy is okay. So maybe I'm too humane for the sport. I mean, to be fair, commentators have, I would say, improved a lot since the old days. They've become more professional in the way they talk about fighters. For example, after the Joshua White fight, when White was knocked out, um, immediately the commentators were saying they hope that White was okay and so on. As it turned out, he was fine. But in the end of the day, this is a sport where the purpose is to stun your opponent to get points. And as fans, there's absolutely no way we can escape that fact. We can argue that it's controlled aggression. There is a referee, and no fighter really genuinely wants to hurt their opponent. And I can tell you something: Chris Eubank Jr. doesn't want to be in the position that he's in. No fighter wants to win on the basis of the other fighter being left in hospital. The truth is, very few boxers are sadists in that sort of way. Very few. And no fighter wants to be in a position where their opponent is seriously hurt. They want to win the fight, but they don't want a situation where they're doing that on the back of their opponent being in a situation where they may never fight again. And that's not Chris Eubank Jr.'s fault. He's only doing what he has to do as a fighter. But I'd imagine he's feeling uneasy. I don't want to philosophize about what he's feeling, but if it was me and I'd known that my opponent was in hospital, I'd be feeling very uncomfortable. And that's not, a criticism of him, but it's just based on what I've heard from fighters who have been in that position, such as Barry McGuigan, such as Chris Eubank Sr., fighters who have been in that position, Rocky Marciano going further back. Um, I'm going to round this up soon, but I really hope Nick Blackwell pulls out of this. But there is also aspects of the sport that well, when so-called fans come out with bum and card, and I know I've spoken about this before, but it's particularly poignant in situations like this. Now, I came across one guy who made that point. He's got 150 likes, but on a normal basis, he wouldn't be getting 150 likes. So I suspect a lot of the people who are saying, "Oh, I hope Nick Blackwell's okay," and so on, um, I may make myself unpopular for saying this, but I think a lot of them are crying crocodile tears. It's the very same people, a lot of them, would have no problem calling out other fighters a bum or a card. Those terms should be absolutely taboo in the sport. If you're a true fan, by all means have preferences, and root for one guy, whatever, but there shouldn't be that sort of disrespect at guys who are risking their life and limb for entertainment. I mean, it becomes very, very difficult to vindicate justified and unboxing fans. And I'm not saying we should have to, but for me personally, I've only been in one fight, so I can't say I've had a huge deal of experience. I lost that fight. But I do have aspirations in the sport. And speaking absolutely bluntly, when I hear about things like this, it does give me some reservation about my own health, about lots of aspects. Am I a hypocrite for continuing to endorse a sport where I have serious moral questions? I even feel uncomfortable when a particular fighter is booed. So maybe what it comes down to is I am too humane for this sport. I don't know. But I counter that with the fact that I don't see myself as a casual fan. I spent time and money on this sport. I spent hours in boxing gyms. I spent money buying Ring Magazine, Boxing Monthly, Boxing News. If I was just a casual fan, I wouldn't have spent all that time and money. Is there any lessons to be learned from this? It's difficult to say what else the sport can do because, the number of rounds have been shortened. Medical personnel are on ringside. The truth is, I think there's always going to be a risk. Fighters know this, so there is that caveat about free choice. No one is forcing these guys to do it. They get paid a lot of money to do it, and they know the risks involved. But it's very, very difficult for me to find any caveat or any justification when a young man could be facing the rest of his life in a wheelchair for something that ultimately didn't have to do. Now, you could say, well, soldiers take those risks all the time, but with soldiers, they're defending their country or they're fighting for their country, and there's political complex issues involved. With boxing, it's supposed to be a sport, it's supposed to be entertainment. So, personally, I have a real moral maze with this. I'm going to round this up. I want to hear particularly from other boxing fans who feel the way I do. In other words, you still watch the sport, you still have an interest in the sport, but you do have some reservations. To be honest, I don't really want to hear from people who have no time for the sport and they just come and say, oh, barbaric, it should be banned. Number one, the sport isn't going to be banned tomorrow. Number two, I do understand your point, but that is not the reason I'm making this video. You know, I know there's strong views on this. I respect your point of view. I understand it. But I'd rather that this was mainly for people, other boxing fans who feel the same way I do. By the same token, I don't want to hear from boxing fans who say, "Oh, you're too soft," or you can't handle it." I don't want to hear from those guys. I want to hear from other boxing fans who know that there is something in this sport that captivates us as fans and captivates fighters as fighters, but also have reservations about it. I want to hear from people who are between a rock and a hard place, basically. The truth is, fighters can't really speak up because they are expected to, you know, be ambassadors for the sport. So professionals who maybe at this moment are thinking of Nick Blackwell, they have to put the danger side to the back of their mind because they themselves may be in a fight next week, next month. They can't psychologically afford to think about that. So I totally understand why they don't want to. I tell you something, this is not going to be the last time I think about this, but I'll round it up there, and I want to know from other boxing fans who may feel the same way I do. Thanks for watching.